Welcome to the Champion Circle. Once again, we are here today and we are grateful for a new year. We are grateful to all of the supporters, all of the viewers, and most importantly, we're grateful to Liga de Justicia Abogados and the Liga de Justicia Foundation for supporting this endeavor where we can showcase, where we can highlight amazing individuals. I am truly blessed to be part of this project. And when I tell you that we have extraordinary people here for every episode, I mean it. And I've been very blessed to have a number of individuals that have come before today, but I'm even more blessed today to have someone that I consider to be family, a friend, and a true inspiration and leader to our community and to her family and to just the world, because I see her organization expanding globally. So I want you to please welcome Miss Dorothy Santana from Latina Moms Connect.
Wow, thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the Champion Circle family, Liga de Justicia Foundation, and Abogados. This is an honor to be here, and for you to invite me to be part of this community is such a blessing. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and it's well-deserved. It's something that I am privileged to be a part of, and to be able to consider myself a partner and a collaborator with you and the organization, and being there from its inception and those stories that go along with that we can perhaps discuss later. Mm-hmm. But the purpose of this Champion Circle podcast, when I came up with the idea, was essentially to allow individuals to tell their story, to talk about their journey, to talk about from a very young age, from perhaps where they grew up, where they were born, to later stages in life, and then ultimately to the present. So I'd like to go back, and I know it's only a few years, right? But I want to go back to, where you were born and where you grew up, and what was your life experience, and what was your family experience. So let's start there.
Wow, that's going back just a little bit. So I was born actually in Elmhurst, Queens. I was born from a Colombian mother and white American father. My parents met in Queens. My dad had come back from Vietnam, and my mom had recently arrived here from Colombia. She had only been here, I don't know, a year or two, maybe less. And they kind of found each other and, had me. So that was in Elmhurst, Queens. Yeah.
Elmhurst, Queens. So you come from a bicultural background.
Yeah.
And later on that becomes a very important theme in your life.
Yeah.
But you grew up in Queens up until what age? How was your youth? What kind of schooling did you have?
Yeah. So spent a little bit of time in Queens. Lived a couple of years in Indiana. I think my parents probably felt, wanting to stay connected to family. So, my mom early on, we were with my mother's family in Queens. Then there must have been opportunity or something that my dad wanted to feel connected to his family, and we moved to Indiana for a couple of years. So I lived there for a little bit too.
At what age did you go to Indiana?
Like 2-3 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
which I still have pretty vivid
and you have
memories.
Recollection of?
Yeah, I do. My mother's amazed. I tell her I remember us living in in a house that we didn't have a formal bathroom. I remember having an outhouse. I remember being bathed in a tin tub.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In the Midwest.
Yes.
Not in Colombia, not in Latin America.
Right. Yeah. And it was because it was a house my father was fixing up. So in those stages of him trying to fix up whatever, he was doing, that was what life was like for a couple of years in Indiana. So I had a lot of influence from my father's side of the family from Indiana. I remember my grandmother, my grandfather, chewing tobacco on the front porch in his rocking chair, spitting in the coffee can. Like, I have vivid memories of that.
Wow.
Yeah. And then came back to Queens for a little bit, lived there till about 5, and then moved to Long Island. My father had the opportunity with the GI Bill to get some loans out to be able to buy a house.
Okay.
And so they bought a house in Brentwood.
Okay. All right. So you moved to Brentwood. I didn't know that about you. Now, during your childhood, did your being that you're the daughter of a man who went to Vietnam, who served our country admirably, and is a hero in our country, did he ever discuss his experiences? Did he ever share anything about his service?
Not until a lot later.
Okay.
Right? But looking back, there are things that I could say, oh, I see why this was like this or that was like that, right? And so my mom tells me stories of when I was very young, we didn't have a lot of money. And for Christmas, I think, they worked so hard to try to get us gifts, and there was really nothing to give. And my father, I think it was Christmas Eve, there was a story my mother tells me that he really just did whatever he could to go out and buy one doll, at least so I can have a doll. And that was something he was on a mission for, and that was something, he did. There were times that he used to love like war movies and cowboy movies and just things like that. And I remembered now I said, oh, no wonder he had a connection to those things like MASH. He'd like watch MASH all the time.
Right.
And, a bunch of other type of things.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Until later, then he started talking.
So you got to Brentwood, and what grade were you in at that point?
I was in first grade
in Brentwood.
Yep.
As a child of a bicultural family. The diversity in Brentwood was what?
So we lived on North Brentwood. So I went to North Middle, went to Pine Park and Twin Pines Elementary. And back then, I lived not far from like the Water Tower that's in Brentwood right there, Chapel Hill. And it wasn't as diverse, or it wasn't very diverse. My community was primarily white. There was some diversity, but not a whole lot. So we lived in a different part of Brentwood than what people, I think, the area that had more Latinos back then was like Regis Park and that eastern part of Brentwood. And so I grew up in the north, and again, going to North Junior High School.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that the student body nor the teacher diversity was very high in your school. So how was your experience, being that your mother, I know her and I know what a passionate woman she is and how much she loves her country and her heritage. How was your experience as far as being bicultural and learning about, a little bit more about your culture?
Yeah, so, again, like bicultural experience, right? And so at home, my mom did some things to instill different cultural experiences and values, as did my abuela and my tias when I would visit them. But, at home, we did a lot of, more bicultural American things, like our food. We ate a lot of American food. My dad was a cook in Vietnam, and so he cooked a lot at home. There was some diversity, thinking back, in school, we had very limited teachers, just like today. I think I had one black teacher, third grade teacher. Everyone else was a white woman or a white man. And the student body, was there was some diversity, but not like today.
And the curriculum, I would imagine, wasn't as multicultural as it is today.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you move on and you get to, I guess, secondary school, high school. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Brentwood High School.
Okay, Brentwood.
The Sonderling. Well, yeah, back then, Brentwood High School had two, right? The Ross and the Sonderling. And so now it's one. Brentwood High School is one. But back then it was, where people who lived on one side of Brentwood would go to the Ross Center, the Ross High School, and people from the other side would go to the Sonderling. So I went to the Sonderling in high school.
So what were your passions during the high school years? What were you focused on? What things did you get involved in?
So I loved art, right? I loved art. Even throughout elementary to middle school, I loved art. I loved singing. I can't sing, but I was in choir from like elementary school all the way to college, right? So I could hold a tune, maybe next to some of the other altos who were next to me. But that, I loved it. And I loved art. I wasn't a big fan of social studies, which is funny because now, you know, that's something that I'm very engaged in when you think about civic engagement and things like that. It wasn't a passion of mine back in the day.
Okay.
But now, you know, it's a little different. And I did like math and science.
Right.
Yeah. Don't ask me to do any computations now, because forget it. That's gone.
Now, did your parents graduate from high school, both of them? Or because many of our generation were first to graduate college or high school.
Yeah. My mom did, and she went on to some kind of business school back in Colombia.
Okay.
My dad did not. I think he got up to like an 8th grade. He completed maybe up to 7th or 8th grade.
Okay.
He actually enlisted in the Marines underage.
Right.
Like his parents had to sign him because once he dropped out of school, he just wanted to go into the military and serve the country. And he went in at 16, so they had to sign for him to go.
Amazing.
Yeah.
True hero.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. 16.
16.
Yeah. And he got 2 Purple Hearts.
No.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So tell me a little bit about that.
I know one was from an injury that he, you know, was walking with his, whatever they call it, you know, your comrades, and was injured through some kind of landmine. And they were in line, and I recall him telling me a story about he had switched places with like his best friend, and he was walking, and the best friend had stepped on some kind of landmine, and then shrapnel went everywhere, and he was injured, and that was I think one injury that he got, and then another one. He was very vague. He didn't share a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they tend to be, our heroes tend to be humble, right?
Yeah.
Especially coming back from that war that wasn't so popular, that had protests here back in our country. It must have been a very difficult time for him.
Yeah.
So during that same time, did your mother or did you go back to Colombia? Did you spend time? How did you connect back to Colombia back then?
So it's funny because my grandmother came here from Colombia and looking for, you know, obviously better opportunities for her family. And she was able to bring she had 3 daughters. She was able to bring her daughters, her sisters, her nieces and nephews. So she petitioned for everyone. She was a seamstress in New York City, and she worked and, you know, did whatever she had to do to you know, provide for her family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in turn, I think being so young, my mom at maybe 18 or so coming here, she at that time really immersed herself, right? And I believe it's common for many people back then to really immerse yourself. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And she got to a point where I think she really was not denying, but just kind of let go of her culture and really just assimilated.
Right.
Really assimilated.
And that was the purpose of so many different groups at that time, was assimilation.
Yeah.
And it was that melting pot where people kind of came in and just blended together and tried to Americanize as much as possible. Right.
And so she didn't even go back to Colombia for almost 30 years.
Wow.
So I had never gone. She hadn't gone when we were younger. She went when I was about 30-something years old. She went on a trip and had a great time. I mean, back then, she was very resistant to going. Not just, I think, because of wanting to, you know, because she had assimilated, but also because the dangers and, you know, all the things that were going on in Colombia, it was not something that she felt drawn to at the time, right? There was a lot of violence. Her brother-in-law was kidnapped and killed, and I think it was just a turnoff for her.
Right.
So she didn't, until 30 years later, she went back. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so you graduate high school and you decide to go to college.
Yeah.
And you went upstate. Mm-hmm. How was that? Tell me about that experience.
Wow, it was great. I loved it. My high school guidance counselor, who was also my middle school guidance counselor, Mr. Ray Perez, he really encouraged and supported me in like completing all my applications for college. My mother had no idea what she was doing when it came to that, right? So he was really one who supported in doing that. And he was like, look, I helped you fill out, we're going to do all these things. Like, okay, right, let's, he did it. And I got, the acceptances, and I went ahead and chose Buffalo State College. And he was excited. That was his alma mater, and he was so happy for me. He really kind of was like a father figure to me. And so I did that, and I loved it. It was a great experience. I'm always an advocate for people to go away if they have the opportunity to go away and have that experience.
Now, were you sheltered before then? And what did you get homesick? How was that experience of being away from home for the first time?
I loved it.
Okay.
I wasn't very sheltered. Well, my mom was a single mom because my parents did split up when I was like 12.
Okay.
My mom was a single mom. She raised me and my sister, on her own. She gave me some freedom, but I wasn't super sheltered. But going away, I wasn't going crazy, but I had a great time. Just a wonderful experience. I got to know lots of beautiful people there, made friends who became family. So it was very much a home away from home.
And did you know what you wanted to study the moment you got there? And what did you decide? What path did you take?
I knew before I got there. So I was probably in middle school when I decided I had wanted to be a social worker.
Really?
And I knew I always wanted to be a social worker.
No way.
Yeah.
Since such a young age.
I knew. I remember vividly watching a movie about this young troubled boy having some challenging times with his family and community, and he had a foster care. He was in foster care, and after that movie, I was like, I want to be a foster care worker. I want to do that. I want to be a social worker. I want to help people, right? It was very, it just resonated with me, that experience, the support that she gave him and the way she changed his life. And I wanted to have that impact on people. And as I just felt like I knew that I wanted that, I also had the experience of like being young and being almost like a counselor to everyone. Like I was just always the person that people wanted to talk to or, felt like they could talk to me, right? And so I was that person. Mm-hmm. So I always felt that sense of, being like the unofficial therapist for everybody.
Right. Well, you do have a compassionate spirit, and that's what makes you such a great leader. But that is very unusual to identify what you want to do at such a very early age.
Yeah.
So that passion drove you to the school and then drove you to that path. Mm-hmm. And talk to me about how those 4 years went and how successful you were.
Yeah, so it was great. I knew I wanted to be a social worker. I declared my major, took my courses, got to Buff State and just had a wonderful time, connected with amazing people. I lived on campus for a little while, and then moved off campus. That was a good experience. It was, I had some strange things happen. I lived with someone who, was a Satan worshiper.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so, I was like, I don't know if I want to keep living on campus. So I was like, any opportunity I had to get off campus, I was like, I think I'm going to move out. And so, I did. I moved off campus and lived off campus for a bit, and then just took classes, and it was good. It was great. I was an EOP student, which was, again, an opportunity that the funding was available to support my family, to help pay for college. Did some volunteer work for internship in the field of domestic violence. And I forgot what the other one was, but that's the one that's most vivid, where I worked with children who were witnesses to domestic violence. And that was a volunteer experience I had, which then really shaped more about what I wanted, right? And so that was then another career. I said, I want to work in that field. That was going to be one of my dream jobs, was to get a job working with children who were witnesses to domestic violence.
Right.
Yeah.
So because of all of the blessings that you had in college, once you graduated, what was the next chapter?
So I graduated, and I didn't necessarily want to come back to Long Island. I wanted to continue growing and expanding. So I'm thankfully have a beautiful family, and my cousin who opened her heart and her home to me, allowed me to live with her for a little while.
And where was that?
In Queens, Jackson Heights.
Okay, so you went
I
back
lived in Jackson
to
Heights.
your roots.
Yeah. Stayed there for a bit, and right away just decided I got to look for work. So right after college, I need to find a job. Again, wanting to do work in foster care, because that was one of the things I wanted to do. As I told you, like, I want to be a foster care caseworker. I didn't get that job at first, but I did find my first job out of college was another incredible experience. I worked as an outreach worker, working with homeless people who had mental illnesses. And the outreach work was going into parks and soup kitchens and engaging with people who were homeless and had mental health issues, to engage them and bring them into our drop-in center. So this was in on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. So I'd go into like Riverside Park with packs of cigarettes, cans of fruit, things to just really try to engage and build a relationship with people who were homeless, and just connect with them. Really try to connect with them and befriend them in hopes that we can get them into our drop-in center, where we would then have support groups. We'd offer them lunch. We had a shower so that they can come and just wash up. And, the ultimate goal was to house them and maybe connect them to our psychiatrist, right? And so we'd really try to work to build that relationship and then get them to eventually see the psychiatrist and hopefully get on medication and stabilize them, to get them into shelter, then with the ultimate goal of getting them into some kind of supportive housing. And so we, for a few people, we were able to do that. I did house, one gentleman, and worked with several others, to stabilize them and in that work. So
being in your early 20s, coming back from school, having lived in Long Island, now working in the city wasn't as safe as it is today, right? You are still a little wet behind the ears, right? A little naive, I would imagine. We all are at that age. Did you ever feel any kind of fear, or did you have any doubts about being able to accomplish your goals, being that you didn't have the experience in the mental health field and you didn't have perhaps the knowledge that you do today?
Yeah. I would imagine back then it was intimidating. It's your first job out of college, but I remember now doing an internship in the mental health field. So that was a plus, right?
Okay.
So I did do an internship, and so that was something that I think had prepped me. Yes. I recall now. It's been a long time, but so although it's still intimidating, it's your first job out of college, but it was something still I had a passion for. It wasn't just an interview either. It was like they interviewed me and they said, "Come on, let's go to the drop-in center and let's talk with the clients." I was like, "Okay, let's go." And so we went, and they just saw how I interacted with them, and it seemed like they felt like it was a very natural thing for me to do with them. And they basically were like, "Yeah, she's good. We're going to offer her the job." And that was it.
So did you love what you did?
I did. I loved it. I did love it. But again, I had a passion for wanting to work with children. So even though I loved it, I was ready to move after, a year or 2 years. I was ready to move into looking into foster care, which was, again, that dream of like I needed to,
to fulfill that dream,
Yeah.
that goal, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about the transition to that next step.
Yeah. So I found a job as a foster care caseworker, and was there for about a year and didn't love it as much as I thought I would.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was working with a very resistant population, obviously because their children were taken away. Mm-hmm. Not understanding back then, being really young, because what was I, early 20s? Mm-hmm. Not understanding really the systemic issues that foster care really does, right? And how it engages with families and what it does to children. So I was like, my role for me was to just really focus on the child that would come when we set up visits with their families and give them the most positive experience possible, and then process what that's like for the kid when their parents either left, or how their experience there in their foster home is, and just really, trying to support and offer them counseling, right? The thing I dreaded the most was, all of the documenting and the paperwork and things that I had to terminate a parent's rights once, and I mean it wasn't something that I ultimately really thought I would like. That I didn't love it as much as I thought I was gonna like it, right? So then I did again because of that one experience I had in college where I worked with children who were witnesses to domestic violence, and also because of some of the personal stuff, right? My father wasn't always the most healthy man, husband in a relationship. There was some types of abuse in my home. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I wanted to do work with children who were witnesses to domestic violence. And so that was like my next dream job. And someone had told me that there was an opening at a domestic violence organization. And I thought, okay, this is great. So I applied. And it was doing what I wanted. That was like my dream job. Came true. It was an incredible opportunity.
So how excited were you? And what kind of stories can you recollect about the successes that you had during that time?
Yeah. So what was amazing was that it was a Latina domestic violence organization serving Latina survivors of domestic violence by Latinas. Right? So it was a bicultural, domestic violence organization serving Latinas on the Upper East Side in El Barrio in Manhattan. And so that was, being able to talk with children, help them process what they're witnessing, doing support groups with them. While it's really challenging to hear what they had to go through, just being able to give them a space to unpack some of those things was a success, right? As hard as you think that is, mm-hmm. These kids need safety, right? Mm-hmm. And so this was a safe place that we created, this safe place for them. We secured people who were in situations, we secured housing for them. So those were successes, right? Women who were calling our hotline looking to escape, getting them into housing or into our shelter was success. So ensuring that we had provided safe spaces for women, that was a success. Yeah.
Did you find that at any point you got a little burned out, or did you get overwhelmed? Who did you mm-hmm. go to mm-hmm. for your support during those times?
Yeah, it was really challenging. I was there for a long time providing direct services to children, then doing direct work with some of the moms, operating the hotline, for years. I did that for almost 11 years. Within that time span, definitely burnout kicked in, which is not, it's not a good thing, right? So if you're not taking care of yourself and you're in the service field, it's really challenging to be able to maintain compassion and, deliver and work in partnership with people you're serving when you're not at your best, mm-hmm. right? So I did get to a point of burnout. And so to address that, I had to shift and do more administrative stuff in the field. So I wasn't doing direct work because I developed compassion fatigue and I wasn't a good servant to the families anymore. So I decided, I had to shift and do more administrative stuff. So I became the assistant to the executive director. And so it was, it's all really supporting her as the ED of the organization and moving forward and administering and having that indirect impact, still having an impact on, in the field and with our clients, but in a more indirect way.
Okay.
Yeah.
What years was that?
That was between 1995 and 2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in 2006, I would imagine, didn't you start your family life sometime around there?
Yeah. Just before 2006. Right. So my first son, he's 23. He was born in 2001.
Okay.
So I had 2 kids while I was working in East Harlem. and was living in Queens. Then, after we had a couple of kids, we says, we could really, use some space, have a house with a yard. Let's go back to move to Long Island.
Okay.
And so we decided to move back to Long Island, and I had my third son, and I was still commuting to El Barrio, and just felt it was not working because childcare was ridiculous. It was like a mortgage.
Right.
Childcare for 2 kids, and then I had another child. So I decided to take off of work and focus on my family.
Okay.
So I did.
But before you took off, how was that life balance, right? So, and this is a reoccurring theme with so many of our guests, especially our women, who are so focused on, being kind of like that foundation of the family at home, right? Child care and all of the things that go along with being a spouse, a wife, a mother, and all of those things that go along with a home care and all of those things. How was that life balance, especially with the commuting and all of that? How difficult was that?
It was really hard. It was hard. Thankfully, my husband, he's an amazing father, an amazing husband. He worked his schedule so that he can be home during the day and I'm home at night, right? And so he worked at night so he can be home during the day to watch, the kids and kind of manage the house during those times.
Okay.
Transitioning, again, really hard, ensuring that we're trying to find people who I couldn't even find people. When I moved to Long Island, there was no choice in finding people to watch my kids
right.
or get them off the bus. That was why we made the ultimate decision for me to stay home and just take care of the family.
So
Yeah.
when you met your husband before you got married, now he is Puerto Rican, correct?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So did you think of the biculturalism between, say, your upbringing and his, and how did that work out in raising your children?
Yeah. So, I knew early on that I was going to be very intentional about sharing culture with my kids and giving them experiences, wanting to teach them Spanish, because some of it I didn't experience, right, in my family growing up. There were instances, obviously, with my family, with music, with food, story exchanges that we had with my grandmother and my aunts and so on. But I did want to be very intentional and, wanting to learn more about Colombia, which was kind of hard because, like I said, my mom had almost, didn't have such a connection to it. So I didn't have such a connection
right.
to it. And I did grow up with a lot of Puerto Rican friends, right? In Brentwood, the Latinos that were there, most of them were Puerto Rican. So a lot of them were people I grew up with. And then having older friends also, Puerto Rico was something, even with my husband, before I met him, I had a lot of friends who were Puerto Rican. And then being with him, I knew we were going to raise, be intentional about raising our kids to, have that bicultural experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were intentional with your children, and so now you transition from that job in El Barrio. What's the next step?
So I give up work for a little while to focus on my family, raise my kids. We didn't have anybody who was going to be able to, support or take care of them. So I thought, well, this is going to have to be me. And I became a stay-at-home mom for several years. And so, yeah, we did that here in North Babylon. And I don't know. It was a challenge. It was very challenging. Any stay-at-home mom will tell you that you're probably busier than when you were working.
Right.
When I became a stay-at-home mom, I thought, oh, this is going to be good. I could, focus on the kids and I have a little break. And oh my gosh, I was so much more busier than when I was working and commuting and coming home.
Right.
I was busier.
Right.
I was busier. It could be very isolating. I also felt isolated. I felt, at that point I had 3 kids. And I thought, wow, this is really hard. And I didn't have, community around where I lived. I didn't know my neighbors. I didn't have other close friends. it was really isolating, trying to raise a family and not feel connected to other people, especially when you want to be intentional about sharing culture with them.
That's interesting that you would use that word isolation when you were home with your children and your spouse, and you're fulfilling the ultimate role, right, of caregiving to your children, and you're running them around to their sports and all of their extracurricular activities, and yet you felt isolated. So that's interesting that you felt that way.
Yeah, and I found that other women were experiencing the same thing, right? It's being a mom, a stay-at-home mom, and if all your focus is your kids, it can be isolating. If you have no other social connections, right? No other outlets, no other things that you're doing that, that's focused on you, your own growth, your own development, right? Yeah.
So I would imagine that drove you to your next decision in life, right? So what was that? Once you decided to not be a stay-at-home mom anymore, what did you do?
Yeah. So I wanted to keep contributing to the home, and I wanted to get connected. So I found this flyer for this group called Parent Leadership Initiative, and it was learn about your community, how to advocate for your community, and learn leadership skills and learn about how government works. And I thought, I've only been in Long Island for a couple of years now. This might be a great thing for me to take. I could learn, right? Although I grew up in Brentwood, I was young. I didn't know how our government worked. I didn't know how the local politics was. I knew it in the city, but I didn't out here. So when I saw this flyer, I was like, I'm going to take this course. I love this. And they offered childcare and dinner. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have to cook one night. Someone can watch my kids, and I can go and talk and have this experience with people and learn about, all this stuff. Right. So I was like, I'm down. So I took it. And it was a great experience. It was a 15-week, I think back then it was like a 10 or 11-week course. And it was one night a week. We had dinner and adult conversation with all these different topics: how government works, leadership skills, how the school system's set up, all these different amazing things that we all need to know around civic engagement and how communities function. And so I took that course, and it resonated so deeply with me that I was like, oh my God, I could facilitate this. Like, I could totally teach this course. Right. I loved it so much, and it really was like part of who I was, and even like all my social work was coming back, right? And so I was like, I could do this. This is great. But anyway, I took the course, had an amazing experience. And I want to say a year later, the director called me and says, hey, we're starting up a new course in the town of Babylon. Would you like to facilitate? And I was like, yeah, of course. I loved it. So I did. I became a facilitator for the first town of Babylon PLI course, Parent Leadership Initiative, which is a program that was run out of the Child Care Council of Suffolk. And
that was the first time that had ever been done in Babylon?
In Babylon.
Interesting.
But the whole course, PLI, was birthed 20-something years ago, I think it was, in the Huntington area, right? And so, but I was one of the first facilitators for the Babylon one. Yeah.
So you facilitate that.
Yeah. For 7 years.
For 7 years in total.
7 years.
So you obviously got a lot of enjoyment from it.
Loved
but
it.
What kind of impact did you have on the students and the people who came to learn?
Incredible. I mean, I would say, if not half, at least most of the people you probably know have taken the course. Right. So many people. If you ask anybody, do you know PLI? Are you familiar with PLI? People will say yes, absolutely. And I've probably, graduated, over 7 years, over hundreds of people. So the impact is great because over the years, people were also asked to create these community projects, right? So using all the skills that they had learned throughout the course. And so people did things. They created community gardens. People made parks in their communities. People ran for school board. People ran for elections, like people are now, some people are legislators, like Sammy's a legislator. He took the course.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So at the end of that time,
Yeah.
what happens next?
So I did PLI, I did some consulting work. So I was able to, again, contribute to the family. I'm trying to remember. So I, again, start to have conversations with people in my community, and again, about parenting, right? And the experience of being a mom on Long Island and trying to be intentional about raising our children to be familiar and understand their culture. And so out of these conversations I was having with moms, I then said, we have to create a space for moms to come together, to be able to talk about what it's like raising bicultural kids on Long Island. Because I wasn't the only one feeling isolated, feeling like I needed connection. One of the other big things that happened was my son came home from school one day and said, "Mom, I wish my skin was pink." And I was like, my heart sank. And I was like, "Puppy, your skin is beautiful. God made you beautiful,
Right.
just the way you are.
Right.
He made us all different colors. We're like a rainbow, right?" And then I thought, why, right? He was one of the few kids of color in his class,
Right.
but yet he didn't feel affirmed in his space,
Right.
in his own skin, right? And so I thought, we have to do something that we're being intentional to share culture, to nurture that pride in our kids so they are proud of their skin color, their hair, their names, their accents, whatever, And so I thought, we have to create a space. So I looked for like moms, Latina moms groups. I didn't see. I looked for moms raising bicultural kids. I didn't find it. Like, I looked because I wanted to join something. And because I didn't find anything, I thought, well, I have to create it. So I did. That was when Facebook, was like became a thing, and I was like, okay, let me create a group. I could just do a group online, Facebook group. And so I did the Facebook group, and a few people came on, and I was like, oh, invite your friends, and then we could share things online. And what are you doing to share culture? And we would just chat, type things up and put posts up on our Facebook group. And then I thought, wow, this is like, people are really engaging and they're hungry for this. We have to have some kind of in-person live event. I can't keep doing, this thing online. And so I was like, okay, let's make sofrito. And that was something that, like, I knew would bring people together. And so we had our first, first live in-person event was Sofrito Sunday. Yeah.
So at that time, that was what, 2014? Is that thereabouts, right? And you had this kind of inspirational thought of having Latina Moms group. And back then it was still Latina Moms of Long Island, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So you start this because you search for something, you can't find it, so you decide to create it. And you then allow it to take its own life, and you use your passion and your energy and your ability to connect with so many people to build upon that. So you talk about Sofrito Sunday, there were other events, and I remember, kind of connecting with the group because I too, right, have a daughter who's growing up in a non-diverse community,
Right.
and I too had Mia come home one day and say, "Papi, I don't want my skin to be brown."
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God! And I could still remember, the tears that wanted to come out of my eyes, and hearing you have the same life experience is a reason for why we connected, right? So now I go searching for that connection because being a kid from the Bronx and, being growing up in such a diverse area, being born in Spanish Harlem, then being raised in the Bronx that was predominant Hispanic, and then coming out to Long Island when I got married and decided to raise my family. I still wanted that diversity, that cultural experience, and you were able to help me with that. and so I started hitting like on all of your posts, right? and then I think we finally connected at a Puerto Rican Hispanic parade.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So now at the same time that you're building Latina Moms, you take a position at Malloy, correct?
Yes.
Right. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So again, I was doing some consulting work, right, to help contribute to the family and wanting to still use my skills. And after doing the leadership course, I realized, I love this. I love, nurturing people, not just the leadership course, but even with the domestic violence organization. Like I said, I had taken on more administrative roles after feeling that sense of burnout. And so being the assistant to the executive director and then becoming a director of programs where I'm then directing organizations, I knew I want to nurture, I can build leaders, right? Can help nurture leaders and help run programs. So, Malloy's opportunity was another great opportunity for me to, again, nurture and help build leaders, right? And so that opportunity was to oversee students who were taking a credentialing course on family development. And so I worked with another amazing woman, Angela Zimmerman, who facilitated the course, and I was the portfolio advisor. And so people who are taking the course, again, several people you probably know also have taken this course, they worked on a portfolio, and I was the advisor, so I had to make sure that everything was in place so that they can ensure that they were submitting their portfolio for their credentials.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you're at Malloy. Is that the time when you went back to get your master's, or was it before Malloy that you got your master's?
I didn't get my master's until 4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go from Malloy, you were there for a couple of years, correct, right? And what was your next step?
I don't know. I don't remember with my resume.
The Long Island Regional Partnership Center?
Yeah. Yes, that was right after. Thank you. Yeah. So I worked as a family and community engagement resource and referral specialist with this Long Island Regional Partnership Center. And so this center operates out of Long Island University, Center for Community Inclusion. And what we do is we go into school districts to help build, for this specific role, help districts build capacity for family engagement, right? For them to ensure that they're getting opportunities to engage families in the educational process so that they can have better outcomes for their students, right? So we know that families who are engaged with their children's education, students do better, right? The communities do better, schools do better. And so I was a resource and referral specialist for that, which was part-time. And it was great because it was flexible, right? I had some part-time work, and then I was still doing I think I was probably still doing Malloy, the advisor, the field advisor work. And then I thought, I want to go back to work full time. My kids are getting older. This might work. And looking at salaries and looking for jobs, there was no pay.
Right.
No pay.
Right.
I was looking at work that they weren't paying this. Salaries that they were paying was something I was making back in 1995. It's like, I am not going to take a job like that. I thought I have to, make myself more marketable, right? Regardless if I had directed programs and ran shelters or hotlines, people still wanted to see a master's degree. And so I didn't have that because I, just was afforded so many great opportunities to build within myself and organizations that I had worked with. So I thought, all right, let me go for my master's. And so I went ahead and went to Stony Brook and did my master's of social work there. And so I went full time, and there worked part time. And once I got my degree, I transitioned to a full-time position with the partnership as a culturally responsive education specialist. Okay. So there we go in, again, we support districts on Long Island, and I go in to support districts in working around culturally responsive practices.
How diverse was your class at Stony Brook? Because from what I've seen, right, there is such a demand for social workers now, especially with masters. And unfortunately, from what I've seen, and this is my experience, I haven't seen enough men in that kind of area, and I haven't seen enough diversity in those areas. And from what I hear, if you're bilingual and you speak Spanish and you have your master's in social work, you can pretty much write, your own ticket, so to speak. So tell me, how was the experience at Stony Brook, and how diverse was it? And talk to the audience about why they should consider it.
So it was much more diverse than when I went to undergrad, which was 20-something years ago, right? So it was more diverse. Yes, you're right. There weren't as many men in the classrooms. There were definitely more people of color than I had expected. But the need, yes, you're right. The need to diversify in that field is great, right? And so any opportunity someone has to consider the field of social work or mental health, if you're Latino, Black, Brown, definitely something to consider, because our communities need people who can identify and understand our culture, right? And how we practice and share different life experiences to work together in those fields, right?
Well, and I would imagine the cultural nuances are so important, right? In understanding the life experience and being able to serve that client. So whether it's Muslim or whether it's our Haitian brothers and sisters being able to speak in their language, etc., all of those things would be very, very helpful to our communities if people from those areas could actually serve in those roles.
So what's stopping people, right? I think a lot of the issue that we don't talk about mental health, right? That's like a taboo topic, right? So one, we don't talk about it. So if we don't talk about it, people from our communities aren't always seeking the services. And when they do, they don't see themselves in the field, right? So if you don't see yourself, it's not something you could see that this is something you're going to pursue, right? So I think that's one of the reasons, right? But, thankfully, I also serve on the Long Island Mental Health Expansion Grant Program, which is a wonderful opportunity. The federal government has afforded opportunity for organizations to work with communities and school districts where they're offering full scholarships to people pursuing their master's in social work and mental health.
There you go.
Yep.
So it's opportunity is knocking on the door for anyone that has any passion in that field.
Yes. If people, know anyone from Brentwood, I want to say Uniondale, there's a few other communities that we're working with. People who are in the field, who are from those communities and are finishing up their bachelor's and are going to pursue their master's, they can reach out to me. I'll connect them with our staff, who will offer them the information about what the scholarship looks like and how to apply. And it's full paid scholarship. And they offer assistance we really try to eliminate the barriers, right? And so if there's childcare issues, they'll offer maybe stipends for childcare. If there's transportation issues, they might offer stipends for transportation. Really trying to eliminate the barriers so that people can fully have the experience of completing their master's fully funded, right? With full scholarship.
So that is another area that you have committed yourself to in order to make a difference.
Yeah, as an advisory board member, I don't have a lot of direct work.
Right.
But
And there are several other organizations that you are part and parcel of, that you take leadership roles, that you collaborate, that you partner with. Tell us about some of those organizations that you're part of.
So I serve on different committees, throughout the community for things that come up. Like for the town of Babylon, they have the Hispanic Heritage Month Committee. I've been on that for over 10 years, probably, celebrating Hispanic heritage in the town of Babylon, which they've been doing it for 20-something years already. I also serve on the 100 Hispanic Women of Long Island program as a board member there. Again, raising funds for scholarships for Latinas who are also pursuing higher education at any level, undergrad, graduate, doctorate. There are opportunities there for that. and as things arise, I sometimes kind of get called in to serve and represent or advocate for, things that our communities need.
So Suffolk County Advisory Council, Hispanic Advisory Council, right? You were part of that?
I was, I was.
Right?
I was on the Hispanic Advisory Board several years ago.
And you partnered many times with Teatro Yerba Bruja, with Puerto Rican Coalition.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. These amazing partnerships, half of the work that Latina Moms Connect has done, that we've done, couldn't have been done without those partnerships, right? And so, Latina Moms Connect, although we started in 2014, very grassroots as a Facebook group and then connecting and being a group, we were able to create some credibility and trust with our community and what we were doing because we partnered with amazing people like Margarita and El Teatro, all right? Yerba Bruja, Teatro Yerba Bruja, and the Puerto Rican Coalition. So those have been amazing partners that, have afforded us the opportunity to, build trust within the community and just credibility, right, for the work that we're doing.
And so many of the founding members that have been there, through thick and thin, like Kelly and Liliana and Gloris Bell and all of those dynamic individuals from so many different areas of professions, right? That were able to help you build and get it to the point where it's a lot more sophisticated now, right?
Yeah.
Now you have Judge Mejia on your board, correct?
Yeah.
Right? And so you've gotten to a point where you've gotten a lot more bandwidth and you've made more impact. So when did it change from Latina Moms Long Island to Latina Moms Connect?
In 2021.
Okay.
2021. So I knew we had to formalize I thought, we have to formalize. I can't keep just having a group. We have to become a nonprofit or a business. We could have done the business route and become a LLC and have a business. But because my heart was always in nonprofit, I was a nonprofit leader, I thought, I got to do this, make it a nonprofit, make it part of the community. And so, I thought, in doing so, we were going to be bigger than Long Island. And so I thought we have to change the name because we have to be inclusive of all the communities that we're going to touch. Because I was getting calls from people in California, somebody in New Jersey, somebody in Michigan, like, oh, do you have something here? And I was like, no, but we will.
Right.
We will.
Right.
And so I thought, what other name can we choose? And you and I had that conversation years ago when I was like, should we consider Latina Moms Connecting, Latina Moms Connected, Latina Moms Connect, right? And so that was back in 2021.
Right. Wow.
That we then formalized and incorporated as a nonprofit organization.
So it's a 501c3 organization that any donations that are made are tax deductible, right? Based upon the type of donation that it is.
Right.
And you have put in for grants and you've expanded to kind of different areas. So it's not just Sofrito Sundays anymore, right?
Right.
You had your first gala, correct?
Yes.
Right? And that turned out to be a tremendous success.
Oh, that was a huge success. Yep. We had our first gala. We do Sofrito Sunday. We do other facilitated discussions that we title them different things based on whatever content we're going to cover. Charla entre chicas, where we talk about more women issues. Temas y tapas. We have conversations that focus on things that kind of impact or are important to our community as a whole, right? So men can be included in those conversations. Machismo, marianismo, financial health, right? Mental health, right? And so those kind of things, those topics we cover. And we had our first gala in February. It was a great success. Carnaval.
Right.
It was a really beautiful, immersive Carnaval experience. And the people and the sponsors, incredible. We couldn't have done it. We could not have done it. We were close to like postponing it. And I said, no, it has to be in February. We got to do this. And we did. We did it. And only because everyone said yes. Our sponsors said yes. All our sponsors that stepped in, not just the financial contribution, but in kind. Oh my gosh, we had, I don't know, $20,000+ worth of in-kind contributions.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I did not realize that.
Oh, yeah. It was great.
That was a blessing.
It really was.
And it just goes to show from you just kind of wanting that bicultural experience to be expanded for your own children, how something has now taken on a life of its own and expanded to such a level where it's not just the parrandas anymore. It's El Dia de los Muertos. It's all of the other cultural experiences. It's Three Kings Day.
Yeah.
It's the gala. It's the Sofrito Sundays. The cafe.
Right.
Programs that you have.
Yeah.
You've had amazing speakers and leaders come in as well, correct?
Yeah. We've had different workshops where we've had speakers come in and do conversations with teens and so on. It's been wonderful, and it's not, again, yes, it was birthed out of like my own feeling of isolation, but because of conversations I was having with other moms, knowing that there was a need.
Right.
There was a need that had to be met. And then affording this opportunity to other moms in our community, one of the biggest blessings is making those connections for them and their kids to have these experiences. But I was also gifted, right? I was also gifted a trip. That was like...
Yeah, so tell me about that. How did she find out about you, and tell me about that experience?
Yeah.
Tell us what show it was and all of that.
So, the Tamron Hall show, I got a couple of... I got an email, I got a LinkedIn message, an Instagram message. Like, somebody from the Tamron Hall show was like tracking me down. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What do they want? Jeez. And when they says, oh, we wanted to talk to you about your Sofrito Sunday, I was like, oh, how did you know about it? We saw it in Newsday. So I have a nice relationship with Newsday, and they cover a lot of our work, right? And they did a whole spread on our Sofrito Sundays. And we've also done El Tiempo with Joe Torres. And so when they were looking at, Sofrito Sunday, they saw us on Newsday, they saw us with Joe Torres on Tiempo ABC. And then they thought, we wanted to celebrate you for Mother's Day. What you're doing for moms in your community, we want to celebrate you for Mother's Day. And I thought, oh, that's so nice. All right, that's cool. I'll come on your show and talk about it, right? And so they interviewed me, and they were like, Glad, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Have you been to Colombia? They started asking all these questions. What's your family life? How many kids do you have? Have they been to Colombia? So I'm giving them, the whole spiel. Like, no.
Right.
Who can go with 6 people to Colombia? No, I've never been, right? And so they said, well, come to our show, and we want to celebrate you for Mother's Day. Go to the show, and, they have panelists. They had like a celebrity panel for Mother's Day. They had other amazing nonprofits that they were highlighting for Mother's Day, nonprofit leaders. And then when they came to my segment, I brought her stuff to make sofrito. I made her, my mother-in-law made her arroz con gandula. I made her carne guisada, and just wanted her to taste it, right? So it's not just, I want to hear about your sofrito Sunday. I want you to experience it, right? That's one thing that we do too. It's like, I want people to be immersed and have an experience. So I wanted her to have the experience of what sofrito was like. So she tasted it, and she was like, oh, it was so delicious. So they do the whole show and interview, and she surprised me. Like, wow, that was the biggest surprise ever.
And what was the gift?
Oh, it was a trip. It was an all expense paid trip to Colombia.
Wow.
A Disney adventure trip to Colombia for me and my family.
God bless.
So it was 6 of us. We were gifted that in 2023, and we got to travel this past June or July. Yeah.
And how was it?
Oh, amazing. And to visit my motherland, like, that was incredible. It was incredible, especially to have that experience with my kids. So we got to go to Bogota. We visited Armenia, the coffee region, and then we ended in Cartagena. My mom is from Barranquilla.
Okay.
I didn't get to see Barranquilla, but just being in the experience, especially around Cartagena, was close, right? It's from the coast, which is very similar to the area of Barranquilla. So it was a beautiful experience. I got to plant a palm tree in honor of my grandmother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, you're going to make me cry.
That was emotional. Yeah. So it was beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just touched my heart, because my mom, My mom's ashes were spread in a beach in Puerto Rico. She died very young. And when she passed, she's from a town called Manatí in Puerto Rico, and the family friends planted a palm tree for her.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand the custom, but it was very, very meaningful for them, and it's become, a major point of me and my return. And it actually survived Hurricane Maria. So, yeah, so that's beautiful.
Wow.
That
It was, and and not just a regular palm tree. Those, the ones that you find in the Cocora Valley. The palm trees that are like 200 feet tall, like the tallest palm trees in the world.
Right.
We were able to plant one of those.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's so well deserved.
Yeah.
Dorothy, you've
Thank
touched
you.
so many lives, and you've had such an impact on my life, on my daughter's life, and on thousands others, So it was great to see when you shared that you were rewarded in some small way for all of the many hours that you sacrificed, right? That your husband has sacrificed, that your children have sacrificed for you to do this work.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that felt like overwhelming and very emotional for you.
I bawled when I got the gift.
Right.
I cried when I got on the plane. I cried when I got there. I cried when I got back. I'm a mush.
Right.
And it was the most touching experience just to be in the place, knowing that was where my mother and my family, my family's from.
Right.
you know?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So how do our viewers connect with Latina Moms? Tell us what Instagram, what Facebook, what's your website, etc.
Yeah, so people can connect on our website, latinamomsconnect.org. They can visit our social media pages, Facebook and Instagram, Latina Moms Connect. Instagram is Latina_Moms_Connect. And so, yeah, we also have a Linktree link. They can check that out and see all the things that are coming up.
And what kind of help do you need right now? Where could you use some talent? What kind of volunteers could you use? Obviously, monetary donations are always something that you want, right? And all nonprofits need them. But besides making a monetary donation, how could our families out there connect with you, enjoy and immerse in the experience, but also volunteer?
Yeah, so we have so many opportunities for volunteering. There's, back-end administrative support that they can offer if people have that skill and interest in supporting on that way. That's something we can also use. For events, setting up for events, helping plan events, coordinating things, it's always helpful. We'll take anything.
And you do a lot of tabling, right?
Yes.
Informational resource type tabling events where you could use an extra person to even if it's a sacrifice of 1 or 2 hours, that would help, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, Dorothy, I just want to thank you for
Mark.
being an inspiration to me and my family, for being such an amazing spirit, and for all of the hard work that you do and how easily you collaborate and partner with so many.
Yeah.
It's never been an egotistical thing for you. It's never been a photo op for you. It's always been a focus on, bringing culture to community and making a difference and supporting folks, whether it's on the mental health area or just in the emotional areas, etc. So I want to tell you that we believe that you truly are a champion.
Yeah.
You are our chosen family, and we want to thank you for partaking and participating today and sharing a lot of your story with all of our viewers.
Thank you so much, Mark.
What closing words would you like to share?
Just, I appreciate the time. Thank you for, choosing me as one of your champions and sharing our stories. I think this platform is an amazing opportunity to highlight not just the work that we're doing, but the stories that kind of build up to why and who we are, right? That tells so much. And just to hear everyone's story, it's an amazing thing. It's a privilege to be able to hear everyone's stories. So, I hope that I'll be inspired, that I'll inspire someone.
You will.
Yeah, and I'm so inspired by the stories I hear when I see the Champions Circle. So I encourage people to just stay tuned for you,
Thank you.
you know, as you continue this great work, and to just stay connected with us, right? There's always, again, like, we really try to create these immersive experiences for families to engage in. It's not just, you know, chatting and talking, you know, with one another. Those are important things too, but the opportunity to have immersive and engaging experiences with your kids, because we want to make sure that they know where they came from, right? What their heritage is, and that they grow up to be proud of who they are, right? So.
What's the last word of advice that you would give to my daughter or any viewer that's watching today, our Latina moms that are out there, our Latino dads,
Yeah.
and just the public in general? What would you say? What advice could you give them?
That it's never too late, right? So people might feel like, oh, my kids are older now, or they're not really paying attention, or they're not listening. They are, and it's never too late, right? Regardless, your teenager may not want to come to everything you do, right? Because I have to sometimes drag mine. They used to come all the time,
right?
Willingly, like, okay, I'll go. And now it's, you know, there's resistance, but it's okay. It's never too late, because what you're building in them now, you're going to see the fruits of it when they're in their late teens or early 20s, maybe mid 20s. You will see it. So it's never too late, and just keep at it. It's not in vain.
Right.
Yeah.
So on behalf of Liga de Justicia Abogados, Liga de Justicia Foundation, the Champion Circle, and of course, Conexion Latina, where we air our program, we want to thank you for being a champion, for being part of our chosen family. We thank the Liga de Justicia Foundation and the Liga de Justicia Abogados firm for all of their support, and we ask you to stay tuned for more great stories. Thank you.